Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this second webinar of the JoinHealth 2024 Autumn Series on Human-Centered Design of Health Technologies. This webinar is promoted by the Health Cluster Portugal and the EIT Health, and today specifically also by Fraunhofer Portugal ICUS. I am Juliana Alves from the Health Cluster Portugal, and with me moderating this session is Carolina Diniz from the IT Health in Stars. This webinar are part of the JoinHealth PT initiative. The JoinHealth PT is the Portuguese digital innovation hub for health that aims to support the digital transformation of the health sector in Portugal. And first of all, I would like to thank our speakers of today. And today we have with us Ana Barros and Ricardo Melo from Fraunhofer Portugal, Portugal ICUS, and also Bruno Giesteira from the Faculty of Fine Arts of the University of Porto, and also Liliana Ferreira, specialist nurse in mental health and psychiatry. Their expertise will guide us through the key aspects of human-centered design. The program of this webinar consists of 3 parts. The first presentation, in the first presentation, Ana Barros will provide an overview on human-centered design, highlighting the importance of understanding users, their tasks and environment, and of involving users through the design process. In the second part, Ricardo Melo will talk first about the methods for understanding and specifying the context of use and users' requirements. And then Ricardo will focus on user-centered methods to evaluate technology. In the last part, we will have Bruno Giesteira, who is the director of the postgraduate course in design of health technologies. And with him is also Liliana Ferreira, presenting a real case of the use of human-centered design. To you in the audience, thank you for attending. And before we move on to the presentation, I would like to leave just a few notes. The presentations will be available for those who request them by filling in the survey that we will share after this webinar. And also the recording of this webinar will be available on the Health Cluster Portugal YouTube channel. And also, please leave your comments and questions for the speakers in the Q&A tool of the Zoom. And just also to let you know that after each presentation, Carolina Diniz will be moderating a Q&A session. And before I hand it over to Ana Barros, I would like to ask you to complete a brief quiz. You can find the link for the quiz in the chat, and it will take you just 2 or 3 minutes to complete, and this will allow this quiz will be done now and at the end of the webinar, and is to assess the effectiveness of this session and to obtain feedback for improving future events. I want to thank you all for collaborating with us in filling out this questionnaire. So moving now to the first presentation of this webinar, which will be delivered by Ana Barros. Ana is the head of human-centered design at Fraunhofer ICOS. She holds a PhD in industrial engineering and management and has experience as a designer, lecturer, and researcher. She has led several international and national research projects and developed new user research methods. Anna, whenever you want, you can start.
Hello, I trust you can hear me and see my screen. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much to everyone for being here. And yeah, this presentation is titled, really, what is human-centered design? Because we always get this question about so what is design in the first place? And then what is human-centered design? And I'll try to answer that. So as Juliana said, I'm a senior researcher at Fraunhofer Portugal ICOS, and this is a center of digital technology and applied research center. So it means that we are at the end of the process and we try to develop cutting edge technology that really reaches the market and reaches people's hands. So this means that we work with medical doctors in the context of health and patients and so forth. And we work not only in health, but also in industry and manufacturing. And recently, we've also been asked more and more to help our partners and clients in thinking about what will be the future of digital technology. And so we are very open to having these kinds of discussions. And to work on these areas, we have 3 scientific teams that work together. So mine, the team of human-centered design, mine and Ricardo, who is here today. Then we have the group of cyber-physical systems, embedded electronics, software development, and also quality assurance and regulatory affairs, and a group working on artificial intelligence. So all the ingredients we think are needed to develop good digital technology, especially for health. That is the topic that brings us all here today. And so returning to the question of design and human-centered design. So usually people think about design as aesthetics, right? So this layer that comes on top. And we are definitely moved by aesthetics. So this is very important to us. But rather than just designing what's in our minds and what we think is beautiful or useful, actually in human-centered design, we spend a lot of time out in the field. So away from the pencils and pens in our computers and into the wild, talking to the users, trying to understand the context, and more importantly, trying to ask the right questions. So what is it that we need to design? So something that you will hear a lot from designers and human-centered designers are questions to question your brief. So this is the first thing that we like to know. Is this really the problem? And here's an example, not from our team, but an example that I like to give. So this is from Professor Yoxal from a long time ago. He was telling me how they were developing this tool for thinking about people with arthritis and other kinds of conditions that make it difficult, especially for older adults, to open up lids in cans. So this is a very typical issue in basic activities of daily living. And so they worked with older adults in the community, and they developed this device to open the cans. And then in the end, they were testing this for usability, and it worked really nice, and it was highly usable, it was effective, it was efficient, so checking all the boxes. And then in the end, they asked, would you buy it? And they said, no, of course I wouldn't buy it. And why is that? Why wouldn't you buy it? You see, older folks said, I live alone. And so whenever I have one of these issues or things to fix at home, I use this opportunity, for instance, to invite the mailman in with the excuse of helping me open taking off the lids, and then I can chat a little bit. And this, so the issue here was social isolation. So this was a greater issue. And so the object really worked. It served the function, but that wasn't the question, you see. So this is something that we really want to get right. And so this is why we ask, is this the question? This is why we go to the users. And some of the users we like to go to are what is called in inclusive design, which is a practice that we follow, what is called extreme users. So users who work in different from mainstream environments. So work in extreme environments or extreme conditions or have disabilities. And in our approach, and the approach of inclusive design, we think that if we design for these extremes, chances are that we will be addressing a wider group of the population with our designs. And here you have, and getting really beautiful examples while at it. So here you have an example of the Bradley timepiece. This is a watch that was designed together and think with blind users and thinking about their needs, but of course, thinking about designing a beautiful product as well. And the result in the end, actually, this one is quite expensive, but the result in the end is that you get a highly desirable product, a really beautiful product that serves a large stretch of the population. So there is a business value in this kind of approach as well. So in human-centered design in our team, what we do is we do design research. We do this kind of user research that Ricardo will be telling you about. We also specialize in kind of designing methods so that to interact with the users in the best possible way to make sure that we get the right answers to the right questions and reliable data to inform our designs. Then we specialize also in human-computer interaction. So we study how human beings interact with digital devices. They can be desktop devices or smartwatches or smartphones, you name it. And then we also do the assessment, the implementation. So we do all this process to make sure that our technology works in the wild, like we like to say. And so to give you a couple of examples, well, not a couple, three examples of things we learned with some of our projects. I'll start with an app that we developed with medical doctors for the monitoring of ALS, so amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. This is a disease that has no cure and that develops at a really quick speed. And so doctors wanted to see data about the evolution of the patients so that they could fine tune the treatment. And so this meant that patients were asked to do a series of exercises and report data every day about their condition, which can be a little bit of a burden. So we tried to design this engaging and aesthetic experience to get these data. But what I wanted to highlight here was that initially we did just some interviews with patients and caregivers. And although we know from good practices in treating personal data that we should give data back to the users, the first thing we learned from the interviews was that users told us, I don't want to see my own data. I'd be glad to contribute and to do these exercises and these to provide these data every day. I know it's good, but why would I want to see my own data if I know that from one day to the next, I will always be worse off. So I don't want to be reminded of that. And so sometimes being respectful also means questioning the guidelines and the good practices. Another example that I have for you is a tool that we developed, again, with clinicians, but this time around for rheumatic conditions and to support clinical trials. So some of the issues that they have in clinical trials is missing data or errors in self-reported data from patients, or patients that are lost during the process because they cannot come to the checkpoints because they're far away or they forget. And so we wanted to optimize this process so as not to lose relevant data and relevant participants. And this has been trialed in different countries. And so here we had to work with the users and the clinicians to understand what would be the sweet spot, the balance between the type of data that we would like to collect, and the burden that we would inflict, right, on participants just by asking for more and more information. And by making it easier for people with rheumatic arthritis to interact with the smartphone. So we did all sorts of usability testing to make sure that people could, with their condition, interact easily with the device. And in this case, we also explore the power of technology of collecting data that is not self-reported. So this is called passive data collection. So this means that we have sensors in the smartphone, and we can put algorithms in there, and we can monitor, in this case, how people just interact with the device. So we could monitor how people interacted with a keyboard, not analyzing the content that they were writing in messages or any of that, but monitoring the speed at which people type away or the number of errors that they do, and doing a study to then convert those data into biomarkers. So to connect that with the progression of the disease as measures of dexterity. So there is a visible and invisible power in technology to support the users. In this case, not to ask them to self-report a lot of data that can be reported in other ways. And as a final example, I would also like to say that we are humans as well, right? So as designers, as human-centered designers, we are humans, and we learn from our experience as well. And and this is critical. So to learn from our experience, to be aware of our challenges, and go with that into the field, into the world, and talk to potential users. So I would like to end the presentation with this example of something that we did to support and promote sexual health amongst older adults and people with chronic diseases, specifically stroke survivors and colorectal cancer survivors. So they have a hard time talking about sexual health and intimacy, even with medical doctors, because of stigma and embarrassment, most of all. And so there are solutions, there are interventions that can be done by specialized therapists on this, but they were not using digital means or targeting these populations. And so we just digitalized this process. And so you can go through an intervention to promote your sexual health in the privacy of your own home. Or perhaps you just want to go through the content and look at exercises in the tube, but it will be nevertheless a little bit embarrassing. We know that, right? Because we're human beings. And so we, together with patients and caregivers and formal caregivers, we designed this experience that would be engaging, but also bearing in mind what is embarrassment for our users. How could we circumvent that? And you see here just how graphically we could create an experience that was engaging but not stigmatizing, that wouldn't embarrass you to use this app. And this is the final message that I had for you. So you need to be open to learn about things that you never thought about, but you can also start from your own experiences as a human being and try to understand how that materializes for others, for your users. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, for that insightful presentation on the principles of human-centered design and design itself, which was very curious, at least for me to hear. Thank you. We have no time for questions. I've checked the Q&A and there's not any. Juliana, I don't know if you want to. You're muted. Okay.
Yeah, not anymore. I was just thinking, if this include the user in this design process is more important in some point of the design, or we need to include the user from the early beginning to the end, and could we identify a point where it's more important to include the users, or it would be during the entire process?
Yes, the latter, I'm afraid. So this is a lot of work. But so as I said in the presentation, thank you for the question. We want to check with users even to validate the question. And so what
Mhm.
we want to design. So even before we have any technology, any solution, we should be in dialogue with different stakeholders. And then here at Fraunhofer, we do a co-design. So is it this? So we start with a very early prototype or idea. Is it this? Do you think this is all right? Should we change it? And until the end that we are testing in the lab and then testing in the wild, because it's a very different thing to test in a controlled environment in the lab and then giving the technology for people to use in their everyday lives where many things are happening that are out of our control. And so this is why I talk so much about in the wild. It's very important. This is the ultimate test, and Ricardo will sure be talking about that. And then you have different flavors of how you can involve participants. Here at Fraunhofer, we are very fond of participatory design, which means that there's a higher involvement, so that where users or certain users or lead users, depending on the approach, can be even part of the design team. But I think that Ricardo will be talking about that.
Okay. And I was thinking that sometimes startups came to us and they expressed their difficulty in get in touch with the users, even not the end users like the patients, but the doctors or something. Is this your experience or no?
Yes, this is our experience. So many years ago, we created a network of volunteers called Colaborar. You can check it out, colaborar.fraunhofer.pt, so that we could circumvent this problem. So we have a network of volunteers who work with us, who are used to working with us, and so we can speed up this process. And we have older adults, patients, but also some formal caregivers and clinicians. It's true that it's very difficult, very hard to find clinicians. And depending on the project, we usually try to recruit through institutions. So bring the institutions on board so that they can recruit within their
class. What we saw sometimes, like the institutions and the doctors, that they are all so busy doing their job with the patients that they are not available for us. And
so I would say that as you specialize, it's good to find the right partners. So I was in an event recently, and one person was telling us she was working in innovation in a hospital, and she said I was in a hospital in city X, and it's very hard to recruit and to get people to engage in the projects. And now I'm at the same position, but at a different hospital. There are just people with different mindsets, and so it's very easy to recruit. So investing in these kinds of partnerships and knowing through others who've been through that who would be the best partners, I think it's very information and investment.
I have another question, but I think it probably would be more adequate for Ricardo, but I will ask now, and Anna, you will tell me if I should leave it for Ricardo, because I was thinking in international projects, for instance, in which the user-centered design is being used, and I was thinking in a country where the digital literacy is higher compared, for instance, with Portugal, and I was thinking the aged population. How do you do if you want to design a product and that this product serve the all this so diverse population in terms of digital literacy or
Yes, so usually in accessibility or inclusive design, you use this concept of scaffolding and getting people, allowing people to select in which ways they prefer to interact with the app, with step by step, or depending on the level of literacy. But especially with this project that I told you about with sexual health and intimacy, something that this project has opened up our eyes to the broad spectrum of inclusive design. So it's not just about accommodating different abilities or in this case, digital literacy, but it's also about accommodating culture. And so we had actually to do slightly different versions from one country to the next to respect the culture. And so you need to be prepared for that. So on the one hand, it's very hard to design universal things, if possible at all. But also be aware that if you want to get to this level of fine tuning, then you will have to design different flavors into the app. It will give you more work.
Thank you. I think we have questions on the Q&A too.
Yes, we do. First question. In user research, why is testing with extreme users more inclusive?
So because extreme users, people with very different experiences from the mainstream, will stretch our minds to problems that we hadn't thought about. So experiences are very different from ours, and this is why we talk about extreme users. So inclusive design tells us that if we think of a task and we distribute the abilities of the population doing that task, we will get a nice normal curve, right? And then you'll get these extremes. So people who are challenged in executing that task, and people who are proficient in executing that task. And so with either extreme, you will learn things, and so beyond the mainstream. And so this is why.
Thank you, Anna. We have another question that is, how can you be sure you have a sufficiently representative population for this process?
Okay, so we usually, we're not looking for this kind of generalizability when we're in the design process. We might be looking, so at the end when we're doing the testing, and Ricardo might talk about that. So when we're testing, we want to have this generalizability of results, but we involve users so that our assumptions are challenged. And this is why, in part, we also involve extreme users. Because if we involve, I don't know, 1,000 mainstream users, they can tell us almost nothing or less than if we would involve 10 extreme users, because the experiences are very different. And so this is why we want not quantity, but we want depth and richness of information to inform the design. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Juliana?
Yeah, I think there are no more questions. Thank you, Anna. Thank you so much for your presentation and for answering our questions. And we will now proceed to the second part of this webinar with Ricardo Melo. Ricardo is a senior researcher at Fraunhofer Portugal ICOS and a professor at ICBAS and the University of Porto. He has a PhD in design and is an expert in communication and interaction design, digital product development, and user research methods. At Fraunhofer, he leads research and training in technology assessment and human-centered design. Ricardo, whenever you want, you can start sharing your presentation.
Thank you, Juliana, and hello, everyone. Thank you so much, first of all, to the invitation to the Health Cluster Portugal, and to the audience for being here and for your interest in what we're talking about. I'll be sharing my screen. I trust you're seeing the first slide.
Yeah.
So thank you. I'll be talking about two main topics, as Juliana mentioned in the beginning. First, talking a bit about the methods that we use in our work, as Anna shared with you, to understand and specify who our users are, how they will use the technology that we're designing, what their requirements and overall goals are. And in the next topic, I'll be talking a bit about how we assess these same technologies according to the requirements that we developed. But first, a bit of context to understand a bit better about our process, and I mentioned this a bit earlier, but and this might also explain a bit more to Juliana's question earlier about when should we involve our users. And the answer, as Anna mentioned, is as early as possible, at least the relevant stakeholders. And this, as you can see, this is the diagram as defined by the International Organization for Standardization about the human-centered design process. And as you can see, well, we have the step 0 to plan the human-centered design process in and of itself. But step 1 is to understand and specify the context of use. And this is where we try to answer the questions of who our users are, what their goals and needs are, and why would they use the product that we're developing. And as Anna shared with you, sometimes the answer is not straightforward and can lead us to divergent paths or to even question our brief. So yeah, essentially, it is to ask the right questions as early as often, because if we do it later, that could have an impact in our resources, into the development process, because as soon as we can clarify all of this, as soon as we can proceed with our design. And then, well, answering these questions about who our users are, we can then specify what their requirements will be to the design of the technology, and then we can start to produce our design solutions, to create these design solutions. One thing, this seems all very straightforward, all very linear. It is not the case. Often we need to go forward, go backwards, do parallel tasks. We might start a co-design process early on, or have a more participatory design approach where, while understanding and specifying the context of use, we are already testing and designing solutions together with our participants. But the overall idea is this. And a bit of context as well, of historic context of why we use the methods that I'll be talking about here. So why do these methods, which are ethnographically inspired methods, why do we apply them in design of digital products or design of technology overall? Well, for historically, in the beginning, the systems that were being developed were based solely or mostly on the experiences of those who will be using it. And a lot of times, those who were designing the technology would be the same people that will end up using it. Later on, and informed by human factors, we started, the discipline started to add some principles about individual cognition, psychology, physiology, in order to understand how better to design mostly computer technologies. This will be things like how large should the drop-down menu be, what the font size of a screen should be, also to make it easier to read, and so on and so forth. However, when the design of technology, and this was in the early 80s, it moved from the research labs and the engineering environments into office settings, call centers, manufacturing floors, etc. It was evident the need to understand how groups of people would use technology, and to understand how this technology will fit into the everyday realities of the people who would work in these different settings. And well, we know that anthropologists and other social scientists have a long history of study, of trying to understand what people do. And also they knew that, traditional techniques such as surveys, focus groups, telephone interviews, and so on, might not be sufficient to truly understand what their overall goals would be. So it was clear that designers and developers needed to get a way of understanding firsthand what the on-the-ground realities were of these settings and how technology would be used in these settings. And this mostly started with Xerox in Palo Alto Research Center and quickly followed by Hewlett-Packard, Apple Computer, IBM, and so on. So in the end, we can summarize this in two main incentives. We use ethnographic inspired methods to help designers and engineers to inform the design of systems to support work and life domains, not solely relying on their experience. But also maybe a more ethical approach is to enable the people who will be impacted by the use of this technology to have a voice into the development of the systems for them. And yeah, ethnography, just very quickly, initially it was used to reveal everyday life in small non-Western societies through participation, through observation. It used these techniques, engaging in social interactions, conversing with people, and through these techniques, ethnographers were able to understand and document diverse realities. Throughout the practice, the field broadened and moved beyond these small-scale societies and started to look at industrialized societies, workplaces, schools, etc. Who we see here is Bronislaw Malinowski, the main figure in the development of ethnography. We can see him here studying the people in Kula. He was funded by the Australian government to go and research the people of the Trobriand Islands. And one of his main contributions was the concept of reciprocity and the exchanges in these people in Kula. He also crafted what we know as participant observation. One side note, initially anthropology was often used as an instrument to dominate other cultures. It was by knowing their habits, their practices. It was also a way to understand how best to control them. So, thankfully, this is mostly no longer the case. So that takes me to the methods themselves. What are the main methods that we use in our practice to inform our designs? And perhaps the most common and one of the most common methods, main methods that we use is the method of observation, where a researcher monitors the behavior and activities of individuals and communities in order to gain an in-depth understanding about them. And the video that you see here is one of the first examples of this being used in an HCI context, where ethnographers were at the Park Research Center observing how people use a brand new Xerox machine. A classical example of observation method being applied to design. And it's really interesting to see the struggles, the difficulties that these participants, that these users were having operating with the machine. So through observation, we aim to we understand that individuals might have difficulties articulating what they do. Their memory is limited, or they might not be aware of a complex phenomenon, or even just one person can have difficulties understanding a broad picture of an overall system. And also we know that what people say and do are not always the same. They can be concerned with their self-image. Some behaviors are more socially acceptable than others. And participants, when we just ask them, they can often answer in order to please the researcher. And as such, observation can fill in the gap, can give us a direct contact with the issues without these conditionings. There are some disadvantages. Some settings are harder to observe due to privacy or just intimacy issues. It also can be difficult to manage, easy to get overloaded with information, might be difficult to ensure confidentiality of our participants, and dealing with the participants' involvement and withdrawal can also be difficult. Also, very common methods that we use are talking with people through interviews. It's a key tool for user researchers, and they are able to provide insights into the participants' own perspectives. So as we saw, we need to be aware that what people say and do sometimes are a bit different. However, through talking with people, we can have their individual perspective, we can collaborate, we can establish this rapport, and together, both participant and interviewer, we are able to identify key areas to explore. We can understand the personal experiences, personal observations. We can know a bit deeper about the participants' lives. And in such way, we can maybe better answer these right questions to better understand how technology would better fit in the participants' work and lives. They can be in various fashions. They can be completely open and structured, flexible, that closely resembles a casual conversation with someone. They can be, or in the opposite end, they can be completely structured, following a formal set of questions, which has its benefits as well. Or it can be something in the middle, a semi-structured interview where we have maybe a script, we have key topics, but then we can, in a kind way, divert from those topics. Usually when we're conducting user research, we begin by more unstructured interviews in order to broaden the scope, to understand maybe a bit better the participants' perspectives, and explore different perspectives, different issues. And as we evolve with the research and the design, we start to observe patterns, and then the interviews become more structured and maybe more focused on what the exact relevant themes are. And there will come a time, or hopefully, where we'll reach a point where the answers will no longer really surprise the researcher. When we arrive at that, we are more confident that we are at the right path. Diaries is another very common method. Well, we all know what diaries are, but it's a document created by the individuals, by the users, who maintain regular recordings about events in their life, what time these events occur, experience, feelings, and so on. And they can fit a gap between naturalistic observation or observation in the lab, or interviews. At the times when we cannot be with the participants, or we cannot be with a specific setting, asking them to record their feelings, their observations, these can be really, really helpful. And they can be written, they can be an audio recording, and so on. And because especially when we ask things such as the moods, the feelings, even pain levels throughout the day, as this changes and is fluid, diaries are generally more accurate than an interview. Because if I ask someone how they felt yesterday or this week, naturally their answer will be informed by their latest experience. While if we ask them to record in that moment how they are feeling, it will be more, hopefully more accurate. There are challenges with diaries. Sometimes participants are not that really introspective. They might not engage with the diary, not fill in as much as we would like them to. It's not guaranteed that time recording will be really accurate. And it is a lot of effort to the participants. So it might be harder to recruit participants for a diary study. Another interesting method, this is more a design research method or a design-led approach, is probes or cultural probes in this particular instance. So what they are collections of evocative tasks. They vary deeply from case to case, but generally there are a series of tasks that we ask users to engage with that give us clues into their lives, into their interactions with, can be their workplace or with others, etc. It is an approach that is more playful, more exploratory, more subjective, that actually values uncertainty, but can be a great way to overcome certain barriers or constraints. So Willem Gaver, that presented this approach, he and his team, they mentioned that they created cultural probes because in a specific project, using an official looking questionnaires or formal meetings or this setting of observation, they could cast some stigma into the interaction. So they didn't really want to force this image into their users. So they created these exploratory tasks to have participants share how their lives are without being too intrusive. The example that you have here from this study from Wallace and colleagues is probes. I think, if my memory doesn't fail me, it is aimed at people who are starting to suffer from dementia. And in this case, it is this cardboard box representing a home. And it was given to the participants, as you can see here, without anything, just with this query, this question that asks people to use these objects to represent what home is to them. What are the feelings, places, aesthetics, words, objects? And here in the bottom, you can see some of the results, some of the things that people did. So what we can see here is that this tool is very, very interesting to have a feeling of how people see a specific thing or a specific context. It is, as I mentioned, more emotional, more subjective, but also a very good way to add a piece to the puzzle. Lastly, when just talking about this quick overview of different methods, we also have artifact analysis. So we know that the artifacts that people make and use tell us a great deal about how they live their lives or do their work. And so just as an example, if we would conduct an artifact analysis on what people have on top of their desks at this moment, that would surely tell us a great deal about themselves, about these people, but also about their own work. Or just studying the contents of a junk drawer in people's homes also could tell us a lot about their habits. And as such, and this is usually combined with observation or guided tours of the workplaces, of the context of people, by examining these artifacts that people use in their work, it helps us gain insight into their practices, their values, and their behaviors. Just as I mentioned, this was just an overview of some of the methods that we use, some of the most common ones. And I know that I'm approaching the end of my time for this first part. I'd just like to talk very briefly of what we do with all of this. So we gather all of this data, all of this information from the interviews, from the observations, from the probes, etc. And what we do with it. So, well, naturally, we analyze it. And this most of this data is usually qualitative data. Not to say that we don't collect quantitative data, we do, and it is very useful to do data triangulation with both quantitative and qualitative data. Qualitative data help us go deeper in many cases, while quantitative data is better to have an overview of a certain context. But as Anna mentioned, we aim for this depth of content, this depth of understanding. But yeah, we need to analyze this data. And how do we do it? How can we make sense of all of this? There are two main methods that we use. We use thematic analysis, which is a systematic method where we break down and organize this rich data from this qualitative research. It is a 6-phase process. It is inductive. It is from a bottom-up analysis where we immerse ourselves with the data. We get familiar with this data and we start to identify items of interest. This is usually through multiple readings of the data that we gather. And through these readings, we start to generate codes. These are just labeling pieces of this data, text that seems relevant to our overall goals. And from these themes, we start to generate, from these codes, we start to generate themes. What are themes? Are clusters of things that we think that create a bigger pattern. It is essentially something that is important about our data and the relationship of this data with the overall research question that motivates us. Can be buckets of things that people say, buckets of things that people do, types of interactions, types of fears, of doubts, etc. After establishing some themes, we review these themes, we reflect upon them, we name them, and we try to define them. So in the end, we try to answer the question, what is this data really about? And how can it provide insights into, as I mentioned in the beginning, who our users are and what their needs are, their goals, their pain points, etc. Another common method, and often used in tandem with thematic analysis, is affinity mapping, where we organize and synthesize data by grouping them into related ideas, themes, or insights. We very similar to thematic analysis, and as I said, sometimes we do this together. We organize, we put pieces of data into cards or sticky notes, and we start to organize them into themes. They are based on similarities, common ideas, relationships, etc. We often do this in a collaborative fashion, encouraging diverse perspectives from our colleagues. We organize these ideas into, as I mentioned, to patterns that will provide insights across these user data, will reveal patterns. We then might try to prioritize these issues or insights into the ones that are more prominent in order to understand what our focus into the design will be. Having done this process, then we are in a better position, as I mentioned, to answer those initial questions and then to translate this into what the user requirements are. And this process can take many forms. It can go from developing user personas, scenarios, user stories, and so on. But maybe that's the subject for another talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo, for your presentation and for giving us the understanding of how user research methods can really inform the design process. We don't have on the Q&A answers for now, questions, sorry, not answers, questions for now. So maybe Ricardo, you can proceed with the second part of the presentation, focused on user-centered evaluation.
Okay. Thank you. So yeah, let's talk about user-centered evaluation or assessment of technology. And I'm jumping a step in the process, if you recall, and we are now thinking about a phase where we might already have something that needs to be tested, that needs to be evaluated in a way. But first, a step back. What are evaluation methods? What is this user-centered evaluation? So evaluation methods are processes for investigating the fit of the developed prototypes and solutions within certain criteria. So this is quite important. These methods can be focused on improving a certain prototype or solution or in assessing their outcomes. And they can be formative, meaning that they are informing the design process while it is happening, or can be summative. So it is a summative evaluation in the product that is being developed, and we want to understand a bit better of how it answers to these criteria, these requirements, etc. It can be user-based or inspection-based. We'll talk a bit more about this in a minute or so. They can be done remotely or in person, and they can be moderated or unmoderated, meaning there's someone there conducting the test or can not be. And as I mentioned, we are now into this phase where we already have some design solutions, and we want to understand if we are within the right path, if we are still addressing the requirements that we identified, if we are checking the boxes of the accessibility requirements of what we are designing, if we're being inclusive, and so on. But first, one of the main things that we test in this phase is what we call the usability of the product. And just quick primer: what is usability? What do we mean when we talk about usability? So if we go to the ISO, it defines usability as the extent to which a product can be used by specified users to achieve specified goals with effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction within a specified context of use. So one thing that we can see here is that usability is dependent on the specificities of the product that is being designed and the users that will be using it. So we cannot ask the same level of, I want to say usability, but if we are developing something for a very specific type of users that will necessarily require training to use this product, it is very different than designing an app that anyone can install or a website that anyone can use. So we need to be very clear of who our users are, what their goals are, in order to properly design the product. And we also have three qualities of usability: effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction. I'll be talking about this briefly. I'd also quite like Steve Krug's from the book Don't Make Me Think definition of usability. He mentions that a thing is usable if a person of average or even below average ability and experience can figure out how to use the thing for its intended purpose without it being more trouble than it's worth. I like this part quite a bit, without it being more trouble than it's worth. Because if we're highly invested into using something, we'll make the effort and maybe we'll tolerate some usability issues. If we're not, what will happen is we will abandon the thing. And just to the right, just very quickly, what you can see here is what is commonly referred to Norman's door or Don Norman's door. Well, Don Norman is the key figure into usability and design. It was the author of the Design of Everyday Things, and this is commonly used to illustrate the concept of bad affordances in design. This is when the design doesn't communicate very easily or simply how it should be used. And these doors, these so-called Norman doors, you can see that by requiring just a label to explain to the user if they should be pushed or pulled, they are failing to, or at least they're not communicating clearly how they should be used. So maybe there's an issue of usability there. But I was, as I was talking earlier, usability is, we should measure it according to the worth of using a specific product to the people. Because if it is, the system is not worth learning or tolerating usability issues, and I'm not talking about critical usability issues that can put, that could endanger the lives of people. Well, naturally, that is a whole another level. But even just talking about a website, as Jacob Nielsen is talking here, if a website is difficult to use, well, people will leave the website. If the homepage doesn't clearly state what the company offers, what people can do with the website, people leave. If they get lost on a website, they leave. If the information is hard to leave, people leave. So no one will try to read the manual to use a website. And a lot of people in these more trivial tasks, let us say, they won't spend the necessary time to try to figure out an interface that is complex to use. And as such, and yeah, leaving is the first line of defense when users encounter a difficulty. So one big danger of a system that has poor usability is that people will abandon it, will not use it, will not adopt it. And this can also even be the case in more complex situations. We often see and were shared stories with us in some of the fieldwork that we did, that workers did not use a technology that was asked them to use in factory settings, for example, because it was or overall complex, or too complex, or did not fit into their work practices. So what happens there? What happens to the resources that were invested into the design and development of that technology? So going forward, I'll be now explaining a bit the difference between inspection-based evaluation and a users-based evaluation. So inspector-based evaluation is evaluations that are commonly done through experts, following guidelines or best practices or standards. This could be a checklist for accessibility, for instance, on a website. This could be a usability checklist. So one of the most common inspection-based evaluation methods is the heuristic evaluation. So it is a method of finding these usability problems in an interface or technology, and involves a small set of specialized evaluators that examine this interface and judge how it is complying with a recognized set of principles. These principles are the heuristics. And the most common or used heuristic are Jacob Nielsen's 10 usability heuristics for user interface design, which is over 20 years now, and still the same heuristics. So they are very broad, and we'll see them in a minute. Why is inspection-based evaluation useful? Well, because it's quick, simple, it can cover a broad range of users and tasks. It is compliant with best practices, usually. As I mentioned, web accessibility is an example, and can be done, well, as I mentioned, in a very quick fashion to test a system that we're designing. It has limitations, naturally, since it doesn't really involve end users. It can miss issues that real users will possibly encounter, that might divert from the tasks that we're testing, and naturally, the effectiveness of this method depends on the experience of the ones that are conducting the evaluation, and also if the evaluation is aligned with the profiles of the real users. But going back to Jacob Nielsen's 10 usability heuristics, these, as you can see in the right, these are the 10 usability heuristics: visibility of system status, match between system and the real world, user controlling freedom, and so on. And you can see they are very, very broad. I don't want to say general, but they give hints, rules of thumb of how a system should design. And we don't have time to go through all of them, but I just wanted to give the example of the first one, visibility of system status. One key concept when designing a technology is that the technology should provide feedback to the user. So the user should know if something is happening while she is interacting with the system. So imagine that you're driving a car and you're accelerating, but you don't feel any kind of feedback. You don't know if you're accelerating or not. That could be problematic, right? You could lead to an accident. That's why even in the electric cars, that the motor is very silent. They pipe in an artificial sounds so people know that there's something going on with the car. Or imagine that it's a bit more difficult, but you turn the steering wheel and you don't see the steering wheel turning, or you don't see the feedback of this is happening. So it is very important for the users to be aware of what is happening to gain trust of the system. So this is a key idea behind visibility of system status. So the designs of the systems should keep the users informed about what is going on through appropriate, timely feedback. So it could be just something as simple as a progress bar saying if something is being sending an email is being sent and if it's finished being sent. Or when we send a text, hearing that sound of the message going forward. That gives us trust that the thing that we did actually happened. And this is an example of an heuristic. So how do we do a heuristic evaluation? We go through a system. We can write some predefined tasks that mirror the common tasks that users will carry out in the system, and we analyze the system interaction by interaction, screen by screen, and we try to identify if it is compliant with these rules. And in the end, we can create a report, something like this, where we identify possible issues are. We explain what they are. We might illustrate it with an image of the issue itself. We identify what the heuristic, in this case, the 10 usability heuristics by Nielsen's, what the heuristic is. We can add a severity rating, so it can be a minor usability problem, it can be a cosmetic problem, so something that it's not that priority, not that important to fix. You fix it if we have the time, or can be a major usability problem or a critical usability problem that should be fixed as soon as possible, and the system should never be launched with these issues. And lastly, also other recommendation of how we should address this issue. So this is an example of an inspection-based evaluation. And now about user-based evaluations. So evaluations that involve the users or representative users, people that represent who the end user of the product will be. And the most common example of this is usability tests. So what is an usability test? Well, it is an observation session essentially, where a researcher, a facilitator or moderator asks a participant to perform a series of tasks that represent the common tasks that, or maybe the most important tasks that a user would use the system. While the participant is carrying out these tasks, the participant observes, takes note of the possible problems, errors, doubts that the participant might have. Also notes any feedback, like any comments that the participants might have while conducting the tests. And then we analyze and evaluate the performance of the system. We can do this. Well, maybe I'll talk about later. We can do this usability test in a laboratory setting, or we can try and do it in a real-world context, maybe as part of a field trial. Well, naturally, it is still a moderated session, being that there is a researcher there that is, well, it is a simulated environment. So that might have, it is not totally representative of a real world scenario, but it can give us already a lot of important feedback on the fit of a system. And when we are conducting usability tests, these are the main criteria that we are looking for, these 5 quality components of usability. Well, first, learnability, namely how easy it is to users to accomplish basic tasks the first time they encounter the design. Efficiency, so how quickly can they perform these tasks. Memorability, so after a period of not using the system, how easily can they re-establish proficiency. Errors, how many errors do users make, how severe are these errors, and how easily can they recover from these errors. And lastly, satisfaction, so how pleasant is it to use the design. And how do we answer this? How do we know if the system is, how it complies with these components? Well, we keep track of the number of errors. So they can be mistakes, people pressing the wrong thing or not realizing that something is a button, can be if a participant gets lost in an interface, doubts, if it goes to the help menu, and so on. And also we can keep track of the time that they spent interacting with the system. So how long does a task take to complete? And how many errors do people make while they're completing it? And satisfaction, we answer this component by, well, asking participants. This can be through a scale, like a very common use scale is the system usability scale, is a standard scale that measures perceived satisfaction and ease of use of the participant interacting with the system. But we can also conduct an interview, or we can also collect these qualitative insights throughout the test. When can we start doing usability tests? Well, as soon as we have a design. So we can even conduct these tests when we have low fidelity prototypes, when we have a paper prototype where a researcher can mimic how an interactive system would behave. So this is called the Wizard of Oz, where there's someone behind the curtain operating the machine. So even something like this, very simple, can already give us some important information if the system is useful to the participant, if it is easy to use, if it understands the main behaviors. But also we can test with more complex prototypes that mimic the overall aspect of a system, of the final aspect of a system. And naturally, we can also conduct these tests with the implemented system itself, with products that are in alpha or beta, or even in a public release state. And, oops, sorry, there is some, okay. So, and this image here is an usability test that we conducted in testing an application to monitor skin wounds. So we have that little doll that has a lot of fake wounds in it, and this is a mobile application that is being tested. So this is what an usability test is in a lab setting, and what is the process of an usability test, or normally what is the process of it? Well, first we define a set of tasks. As I mentioned, we start with the most important tasks, with the tasks that we think are key, are critical to a system. And then maybe throughout the testing and throughout the development of the product, we then start testing the less common tasks that participants would do with the system. So we define these tasks, and then we give a scenario to the participants that would represent a real world use of it. And then we gather together and we record these sessions. We ask the participants to interact with the system. We usually have people facilitating the session, but also we might have someone observing and tracking the issues that may arise. As you can see, a colleague there in the corner filling out a test sheet. We should instruct the participants in very plain language what the purpose of the test. Also make them clear that they are not the ones being tested. It is the system itself that is being tested. We conduct the tests. In the end, we can conduct a questionnaire or a post-session debriefing, maybe a short interview, and so on. We tend to do groups of in each iteration of a system. We try to have at least 5 participants per iteration, and we repeat this until we arrive at a place where we do not see usability issues, usability problems, and the system is ready to be deployed. So one thing that is not that I won't get into detail here, as I'm running out of time, is field trials, is testing technology in actual real-world settings. In those situations, well, we don't have. We want to stimulate an environment where the technology is used without moderation, without the facilitation of the researchers, and within the context of the participants' lives. So that will be the next step, taking this technology and taking it out of the laboratory and putting it into the people's lives or people's workplaces, and see, as Anna mentioned, through logs, through data logging, and this passive data collection, to see how the technology fits into the practice of the people. But yeah, this is an overall a general view of the process of conducting evaluation of technology. Oops. Okay. Stan, thank you.
Thank you again, Ricardo, for your presentation. We have a question from Teresa. And Teresa says, how different is the user research process in product design and communication design? Or in other words, making a product versus communicating a product? What's the difference?
Quite a bit different. It is a complex question, but well, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you, Teresa, for your question. It is a question that I was not expecting it. I would say that well, it depends, right? We can even apply many of these methods into communicating a product. I can see it. I can see a case where we could have even a user-based, user-centered approach into designing the communication of a product. I would say that but it depends also in the product that we're designing, naturally. But well, talking about health technologies as we are talking today, there are requirements and needs into the design of a product that is going to be used by the users that will have an impact into their daily lives that might not apply in communicating a product, into designing. And I'm talking about someone that my background is in communication design. I would say that again, depends on the products and what the thing that we're designing. So, but when we are communicating something, when the artifact that is attempting to communicate is done, it has fulfilled its purpose. And usually we don't have a lot of opportunities to improve upon it. And its impact on the user has also happened. When we are designing a product that we intend to have a long life, that will be used a lot of times, that will engage with a lot of maybe different people throughout its life, naturally its impact will be long-reaching, and that makes it more key that we identify any possible issues that product might have. I don't know if I answered you. You stumped me. It is an interest. I'll be thinking about that question throughout the day.
Okay, so Ricardo, ready for the next question. Have you been introducing AI tools in the research process? If so, how is it impacting the overall process in your projects? How do you think it can be more useful for the users and for the designers?
Well, naturally, we had to talk about AI. I think it was just getting late before the elephant arrives. Professionally, I haven't, and we haven't for a variety of reasons, especially when dealing with participants' data. It is very sensible. It's a bag of worms, thinking about using these AI tools to make sense of it. But naturally, we cannot be behind the curve, and we are thinking about it, maybe making some trials here and there, testing it to see what its possibilities are. Talking about large language models, things like ChatGPT and the complexity and stuff like that. And also some things that we've observed in the community, a lot of research papers, a lot of projects that are about this exact thing, using AI tools in user research practice. And well, I can say personally, I haven't been really impressed by the results of these tools. In my experience, they tend to be very superficial, very obvious. They lack the depth that a person that is immersing themselves with the data usually identify. And also using these tools, again, personally, this is my opinion, we are jumping a step that I think is as important as the results of the user research, that is empathy and engagement with the data. I think going through the analysis of the data, going through the readings of the materials, I think we start to gain an in-depth knowledge of the persons, of their questions, of their goals, their needs, etc. By using these tools, and the idea of using these tools is to spare us time, right? Is to shorten the time that we spend with this with this information. By using it, usually we cannot gain the same level of engagement with this data, and this has risks, right? This has risks of dealing also in a more superficial manner with the insights, with the results of the methods that we apply. And also, and not to completely throw the, how do you say it, the baby with the bathwater or something like that, but also I would say that it doesn't really sit that well with me asking participants to engage in the level that they engage with us through interviews or co-design sessions or observations, and then just asking bots to analyze all of that. I don't know. This is my personal opinion. Having said that, I do see some potential when we are dealing with large, but really large amounts of data that no person could, within their time and resources, could make sense of. In that case, and that hasn't been the case in the projects that I've been involved with, but when we do have large and very, very large data sets that we want to maybe cross some information or try to compare and contrast with maybe our own user research and maybe see if there's something that we might have missed, I can see that being a partner in our process. I see Anna that has her hands raised.
Yeah, I'd just like to share a couple of things. So the other day I was reading Von Tan talking about this, and he pointed out an interesting difference. So you might think of perhaps using artificial intelligence for these purposes that bring us here today, for sense making, but not for meaning making. So I thought that was really well put, like a general guideline. And the second thing I would like to say is that these are really interesting times, perhaps not yet to use AI, or at least this new wave, right, of large language models, because there's a lot of AI, different AI, but maybe not yet in this kind of work that brings us here today. But it's an interesting time to think about how to convey the usability of the model. So how to make these systems transferable and usable to the user, so they're perhaps oftentimes very complex and influencing people's decisions. And so for designers, using this using AI as design material is interesting currently. So these are my 2 cents.
Okay, if there are no more questions for now, I would like to thank to Ricardo for sharing his expertise with us, and also to Ricardo and Anna for clarifying the doubts of the participants in the webinar. And now let's proceed to the last part of this webinar. In this session, we will have Bruno Giesteira and Liliana Ferreira. Bruno is an associate professor at the Faculty of Fine Arts of the University of Porto, and he is an expert in human-centered design, particularly within health and well-being context. And he directs multiple post-graduation programs in design and technology for health. Liliana is a specialist nurse in mental health and psychiatry and a PhD student in nursing at ICVAS, and she holds postgraduate degrees in nursing services management, health technology design, and digital health. And thank you both for being here. And now I will hand it over to Bruno.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Okay, I think that I'm sharing, yes, my presentation.
You are. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Well, as you mentioned, I'm currently also the director of the doctoral program in design. But what brings me here is the post-graduation course in design technologies for health. A partnership between the design department of fine arts faculty, engineering faculty, medicine faculty, the three of the University of Porto, and of course the Institute Fraunhofer ICOS. This course has its seed in a previous post-graduation course, the Interaction Design and Games. Well, that in a very organic way, actually is debut year of that post-graduation course. So it starts in 2017. So it has already several editions, and in a very organic way, it tends to settle a lots of health and well-being projects. So it was natural that throughout the time other post-graduation course will born, and in 2022 we have the opportunity to launch this post-graduation with all of these partners, and this is being a great experience until now. As you mentioned, Juliana, we have here Liliana Ferreira, one of the former students as well, and I count with her to complement what I will share some ideas about the course. Even so, I'd like to return to. I take some notes because I think that was very interesting. Something that Ana Barros have said about design. What is design? And then the tricky question that was made to Ricardo about the communication and product, the difference between the assessment. I think that when we talk about design in a etymological way, we are talking about designio, so planning, process, and maybe no, I'm sure sign. So I think that I'd like to share this idea, design as a process that maybe relates more to this image, to this graphic, as a process with different stages, unlike an end by itself. So, for example, when we are identifying needs and expectations of users, and was also something that Ana Barros highlighted, and I'm fan of a lot of that kind of ideas. We need to identify, we are already designing, and we need to identify functional needs and expectations, as well emotional needs and expectations. And that is very relevant. Considering the second tricky question to Ricardo, that was addressed to Ricardo, the communication product, I think that's, and my 2 cents, I feel, and I think that already reflects in the university, that the communication and product design is more and more intertwined. So we see that in the wearables technologies, and we see also there, and I think that is symptomatic. For example, in design bachelor, we already have a product design class, as well as introduction to programming. And for example, in the masters, also a partnership between the fine arts faculty and engineering faculty, the masters of in product and industrial design. Myself have a class in which the name, I think that is very obvious, this relationship is ergonomics in interaction design. So when we need to deal and talk about the communication and the product in the very articulated way. So I think that these 2 questions that were previously highlighted, I think that were very interesting and relevant. So as I said, what brings me here today is the post-graduation course in Design Technologies for Health, with these 4 partners. And yes, so in this, and I was saying that the seed for this post-graduation course was the post-graduation course of that's still running in interaction design and games, that tends to have more and more this perspective of health and well-being, with a lot of projects in that scope, and that was not strategic, was very organic, well path, that I think results from the profile of the teaching team. So most of us were conducting our research in this scope, in these areas related to health, well-being. So it was very natural to the interaction design and games have this kind of profile. So that conducts us to launch the other post-graduation course, Design Technologies for Health. And of course, both of them assumes the human design center. So the design considering a process that needs to, of course, passing through different stages, and all of them are design, identifying needs and expectations of users. User research, as already was talked today by Ricardo. User research, so study, worked and apprehend different methods and tools to do the user research to identify needs and expectations. Observe users and context of use, so establishing context scenarios and identifying task analysis. Designing a solution, constructing conceptual models, interaction scenarios with different levels of fidelity, of prototype fidelity, so low-fi to high-fi, and evaluation. All of these stages with iterative, of course, approach. Okay. So saying that, in the Design Technologies for Health, we have 6 models. We call models of unit curriculum. Why models and not unit curriculums, so classes? Because, for example, as we see here, Model 1, human factors and cybersecurity. So first of all, let me read the six. So we start by the model human factors and cybersecurity. Then the second model, user research and user-centered design. Third model, interaction design, prototyping and interface design, implementation and evaluation, and then project. We call models because they have a linear path. So, for example, we only start the second model, user research and user-centered design, after the human factors and cybersecurity have finished. And then interaction design will start only when user research and user-centered design model have finished, and so on. So we have two different phases. The first one that aggregates the five first models, that is what we call a formative phase. So where we work with our students the fundamental competences, considering the design in this specific context, in health and scope. So starting with the human factors and cybersecurity, and this this formative phase has a direct relation support with Synthesis, that is a research center of Faculty of Medicine. So here, throughout these models, our students work with different teams of Synthesis and with different projects as well. So we work here in this formative phase about, for example, human factors and cybersecurity, about the relation about the human factors and the security, privacy of data, etc. The user research and user-centered design, we talk a lot about different topics that already was tackled by Ricardo about user research in this perspective of human-centered design. Different methods to support the identification of needs and expectations of the potential users, not only the final users. This is also a relevant issue, but the ecosystem of the users, the persons that are related to the final user. Sometimes they are forgotten. Interaction design, where we deal here about patterns and principles related to interaction design. Prototyping and interface design. This model is a very straightforward and hands-on model where students prototype their project, Synthesis project, working with, and not to, but with the Synthesis team, research teams, and implementation and evaluation, where they in an iterative approach developed and developed the high fidelity prototype. And then, being 1 year, a post-graduation course of that has more or less 1 year, beginning by September. In February, March, our students follow up to the sixth model that is called project, working directly with Institute Fraunhofer ICOS. So they work with different teams of the Institute in different projects. So they could work in person, so presential in the institute, and in a remote mode. And this is, well, an asset to this course. So here we call project because our goal is after the formative phase, they could, well, put in tangible the acknowledgements, the sensibilities in real scenarios. The real scenario is, I don't know if it's wild, as Ana Barros shared, but is with Fraunhofer ICOs. So as I have, I don't have much time, I will share just two examples that I think demonstrate well what we have done until here and different stages that, well, a typical project in this context passes. And then I give the floor to Liliana Ferreira, that will present a specific project that was developed in the previous year. So this project is Anatma. I think that is a good project to illustrate what we have done and still do with Institute Fraunhofer ICOs. Ana Barros already shared well, the umbrella of this big project in her presentation. So, and here the solution for a better sexual health in relationships. So this is the assumption that that the students had to develop the project. So I will share a video. So this, well, I will saying more just the presentation of the video. So the students that so here in this video of 3 minutes, we can follow up the user research stage. So interviews, gathering all of information, a mood board, the definition, user personas, so definition of goals, motivations, expectations of the final users and their ecosystems, user scenarios, requirements, and then the prototype phase from the lo-fi fidelity, co-designing with potential users here. So in a lo-fi and maybe in a paper mode prototyping to the hi-fi. So this was developed here an app that tried to foster the empathy in a couple related to their sexual life. So this project, the proponent was the Institute Fraunhofer ICOs. Has the main assumption of the elder people, as Ana Barros have shared previously, but our students, also because the constraints of the being able to work with in a participatory approach, they have opted to develop a more wider application, not specific related to elder people. Even so, was a great, a lovely project that I think illustrates very well different stages of what we are working in this post-graduation course and in a close partnership with Institute Fraunhofer ICOS. Okay, to manage our time and to pass the floor to Liliana, a final example that I think also that illustrates in a totally different perspective, also a project in which the proponent was the Institute Fraunhofer ICOS. The project that calls OLOVs is assumes a speculative perspective, so a futuristic approach, and putting us in a future scenarios, trying to speculate how we can deal with data in future, and how could be the relationship between the doctor, the clinical staff, the patient, the person, and the data. So I think that is a very a great example to complement the previous one, as it assumes this speculative approach. So let me. So here this video is in Portuguese. What we have here is the main leitmotiv is to, try to depict and speculate different ways to visualize data in future. So we have here the Dr. Neil Armstrong making his login and updating some data of his patient. And visualizing the data. Almost in real time, and trying to figure out if everything is okay with his patient, and an anomaly is detected. So the Dr. Armstrong will try to figure out what happened with his patient. For that, he will try to visualize the data in other form using his virtual reality glasses. Having access and a perspective more immersive, as being inside the body of his patient and trying to figure out or studying the different data that he gathered, and try to see if there is any correlation between data that could drive us to some conclusions. Okay, seems to be some data that have a correlation. So here, I think that we could also, to manage our time, our students tackles in a different way, in a more speculative way, different ways to foresees the data in health context. So in this post-graduation course, and even the last,
Bruno,
yes,
I'm gonna ask you to summarize a little bit. We are
okay, some projects, Nutria, Parent Coach, Anatma, Endometriosis, Party Fam, and sensing that this one, I will give the floor to Liliana Ferreira to, present and depth this project. Sorry, Juliana. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruno. Could you please, Bruno, stop sharing your presentation to allow, and I'm gonna ask also Liliana to be as fast as possible.
Are you seeing my presentation?
We are.
Yes, okay. I'm going to talk less than Professor Bruno, I think, I hope. Well,
Sorry,
thank
sorry,
you.
Liliana.
Thank you very much for the invitation. And so, as Professor Bruno was telling, as part of the post-graduation program in Design of Technologies of Health, me and Emmanuel, I am a nurse and Emmanuel is a designer. We collaborated with the Innov Sensing project from Fraunhofer ICOS in Module 6 of the post-graduation program. With the mentorship of Cristina Santos and Maria Lua Nunes, Innov Sensing is a pilot cognitive behavioral internet intervention to detect, treat and monitor anxiety and depression in breast cancer survivors based on multimodal active and passive sensing data. Our goals when we started collaborating with this project were to explore the acceptability of breast cancer survivors to multimodal data collection using smartphones and bracelets with the aim to obtain a digital phenotyping and create a predictive AI model to predict the evolution of psychological conditions in breast cancer survivors, to explore the acceptability of data typologies, data collection, analysis, and visualization methods, identify requirements for the design of interfaces for multimodal data, explore how that data can support self-care in breast cancer survivors, and to design and test a lo-fi prototype. Our methodology was based on user-centered design, and we used interviews, thematic analysis, co-design session, a lo-fi proto, and usability tests. We created some materials, a recruitment poster, as you can see in the picture, an application form, some social media channels to have more participants. We created informed concepts, forms, scripts, sociodemographic surveys, and we used the system usability scale. We divided it in 4 phases. In the first phase, we made some literature review about digital phenotyping and breast cancer. In the second phase, we made a semi-structured interview, verbatim transcription, and a thematic analysis. In the phase 3, we made a co-design session. And in phase 4, we made a lo-fi prototype and the usability testing. So on phase 1, we made some literature review so we can get familiarized with digital phenotyping, collection of passive and active data, and to know something more about anxiety and depression in breast cancer survivors. In phase 2, we made 8 interviews with some topics like tell me about you, the acceptability of multimodal data collection, the perceived benefits, barriers, and challenges. After the verbatim transcription, we made a thematic analysis and we identified some themes like psychosocial unmet needs, the fear of recurrence of the breast cancer, the self-care technologies used, the multimodal data collection, the willingness for data collection, system feedback, and the willingness to use the app. Resuming our findings, we found that breast cancer survivors are open to multimodal data collection. They emphasize the importance of psychological support. They show interest in using data to more effective and tailored support and to support AI predictive models. But we had just an issue, or in their own access to data, 25% said it could be disturbing, and 12% that they wouldn't know how to interpret them, those data. So the others think it would be helpful, and there were no issues with data sharing. We developed the persona by synthesizing insights gathered during the interview, reflecting the needs and the behaviors of the breast cancer. Our person was Joana Silva. On phase 3, to explore the ways to present data and how we can convert it into effective ways to help and support breast cancer survivors, to approach the useful of data visualization and to seek the confirmation about the interview's findings, we made a co-design session. In this co-design session, we had 4 participants, 3 of which participated in the interviews before. This is in the Fraunhofer Institute in Porto. So our findings in the co-design session were related to boundaries to access raw data, have a friendly human-like, to choose the family members and the healthcare professionals who can access their data, be able to choose the time of alerts, to receive negative and positive feedback, and to have the possibility of contact and consultation if necessary. In the image, we can see a storytelling created by them in the co-design session. So we had the requirements for the lo-fi proto. So it was a human-like avatar, as they wish. They wanted to, they don't want to have access without boundaries to their own data. They wanted to be able to adjust time. They want to receive positive and negative feedback, and they wanted to select the family and the health professionals who will have access to their data. To the human-like avatar, we used an existing avatar collected in a previous project called BameCare. So we don't have time to create and study one. This is our lo-fi prototype. This is the BameCare shot that we used. We can see some. So after the lo-fi prototype was completed, we made the usability tests with 5 participants to evaluate the usability performing basic tasks, to identify obstacles to reading and understanding the features, to determine the satisfaction, and to identify changes needed to improve the experience. So we made 5 tests with 23 minutes in. And there are the results of our usability tests. We made the first one is the completion rate by task. The score they gave us from 1 to 5, how easy was the task, and the SUSE, the system user, the scale, we had an A score in all the tasks. We concluded that this was the end of our participation in this project. We concluded that we need to include other stakeholders like the family members or the healthcare professionals that will have access to the data of the breast cancer survivors. We concluded we had a small sample size, and we concluded too that we had limited time to the project, only 3.5 months. And we think that there's potential for more co-design sessions. Lessons learned. The recruitment process is very hard. Planning is the key. Breast cancer survivors are active participants. Recruitment sources may be in the less obviously places like manicures. We discovered that it's difficult to make participants to read the text in the prototype. Portuguese can be tricky, even in Portuguese, with Portuguese people, and different users are used to different systems. I can only ending saying that this month we made a communication in oncopsychology in the National Congress of Psycho-Oncology and Brazilian Portuguese Congress of Psycho-Oncology, and that in the previous phases, or in the previous models, in the other project with Synthesis, we collaborated with the project of Ana Ferreira. It was about GDPR in research in health. And from that project, we have an article, and we are going to present it next month in the International Conference on Computer-Human Interaction Research and Applications. Thank you.
Congratulations, Liliana. And thank you both, Liliana and Bruno, for your sharing. I don't know if there are any questions on the Q&A. There are no questions. So and for the sake of the time, what I'm going to propose is that for the participants that want to contact with the speakers, if the speakers agree, we can share your emails, we can continue the discussion of these topics after this webinar. And before wrapping up, we invite you to take again 2 minutes to complete the final quiz. You will find the link again in the chat for that. And after that, we have only few notes to give you. So thank you for those that give their feedback and fill in the quiz. To all the speakers, once again, thank you so much for your insights and for sharing your experience. And to the participants, thank you for attending this webinar, and I hope you have found it informative. And just to some more notes to invite you to follow the Health Plus Portugal and EIT Health through our online platforms and social networks to learn more about these and other activities we are promoting. And regarding the Digital Innovation Hub, the Digital Health PT, that is a digital innovation hub focus on health. If you are an SME, there are several services that you may benefit from. So I invite you also to check this project and on our website. And lastly, I would like to invite you to the last webinar of this series. This webinar will be on next Tuesday on driving growth through innovation management, insights and strategies. Registrations are mandatory, and you may check more information about the webinar by scanning the QR code on the screen. And I hope to see you all there, and have a nice week.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so
Thank
much.
you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
You have a Q&A.